Everything going up. More bad news for consumers. The National Energy Regulator of South Africa is proposing an average increase of 7.47% in municipal electricity tariffs from the 1st of July. The Energy Regulator is proposing the increase despite an admission that the method it uses for the tariff settings is flawed. It is currently facing a legal challenge against the tariff structure. The regulator admits that the current method does not explicitly show the relationship between the licensee's cost structures and its tariffs, but it wants to continue using the method by providing a guideline to municipalities for the coming financial year. The new tariff methodology will be made available for comment at the end of this month. All right, let's talk now to Chris Yelland and get a little bit more clarity on what this means. Chris, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. We were talking 20.5% Eskom increase. They didn't get that. I think they just got 9.6%. Now we are talking another 7.47%. From where? Where does all these increases come from? And when you add them, it looks like they're going back to that 20.5% that Eskom wanted in the first place.
No, I think that's not quite correct. So, yes, you're right. Eskom had a price increase on the 1st of April of approximately 10% in round figures. And municipal tariffs have not gone up on the 1st of April by 10%. They're going to go up on the 1st of July by approximately 7.5%. That's what Nersa has worked out and allowed. So it's not a case of 10% plus 7.5%. It's 10% for Eskom direct customers and 7.5% for municipal customers. I just want to make that distinction. You see, municipalities, the cost structure of electricity, about 70% of the municipal distributor costs are the actual electricity energy that is purchased from Eskom. But they also have other costs which are their own internal costs for running their distribution network, which accounts for about 30% of the tariff. So when you blend the 10% increase from the energy price from Eskom together with the municipal costs, which are generally going up by inflation, you get this figure of around about 7.5%. I must add that, unfortunately, some municipalities are pushing for higher than 7.5%.
Yeah.
But Nersa has determined that about 7.5% on average is what it will allow. But there may be municipalities that are a little bit higher than that.
Where does that put, for example, I think I was having a conversation yesterday with the city of Cape Town mayor, and his electricity is sitting way above that particular amount. I think it's about a 9.2%, 9.61% increase is what he's proposing.
Yeah, that's right. You see, some of these municipalities, like City of Cape Town, are kind of pushing for the same kind of price increase that Eskom is putting its price up by. I don't think that's fair, though. I don't think that's right, though. And I don't think Nersa believes that it's right, though, because, as I mentioned, only 70% of the municipal tariff is accounted for by the price of energy from Eskom. So if they were to put up their full price by 9.5%, 10%, it would mean that they're actually doing price increases of double the inflation rate on their own internal costing for running their business. In other words, their operations and maintenances of the municipal environment. And I think that would be unrealistic. Of course, I do think Eskom's price increase of double the inflation rate is also unrealistic in terms of what people can afford. But Nersa, the regulator, has to balance the question of sustainability of Eskom's business with the affordability and the interests of customers and the economy. So, yeah, it is true that Cape Town is pushing for 9.5% increase, which is certainly above what Nersa is wanting to provide.
Yeah. Peter is joining us as well now on the line. Peter, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us. Hope you can hear me. If you can unmute there, Peter Sutton. He's with the Tshwane municipality. Peter, let's talk about what the implications of this means, I suppose, for you, that Nersa has kept this average increase at 7.4%.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me. Look, we also had a 9% increase proposal that we had in our tariff. They capped it, and it's still a very high effect for our consumers, especially based on the past increases we have seen. And we do anticipate that it's going to have a huge effect on our consumers going forward. As a rule in the city of Tshwane, we don't oppose any additional to what the Nersa tariff is, and we will certainly have to amend our budget accordingly as well to link into the 7%.
Yeah, and generally, what would this mean as far as, of course, what you are paying for electricity from Eskom, and what you will be charging your consumers vis-a-vis, of course, the delivery of services and the delivery of this electricity?
Yeah, look, it will certainly have an effect, obviously, on our bulk purchases, which is the highest or one of the largest items on our budget that we need to provide for. And then, of course, we need to transfer that through to our residents and then collect on that. So there will be an additional increase from the tariff collection on that. But also what we see, the effects of that, we see a lot more because of the unaffordability that we're finding, of the economic circumstances we are finding. We see a lot more non-technical losses. We see a lot more illegal connections, and there are other effects, so our electricity losses are a major problem for us, which puts more strain on our revenue collection and our balancing of the books. And as you might have seen or known, that the city of Tshwane is not in a very favorable financial position at the moment with our budget situation and our financial situation. So that will certainly have a very major effect going forward, especially on the affordability from our residents, what we have seen, and our businesses.
Yeah. Chris, let's then talk about this flawed method of setting tariffs. It's a historic method of setting tariffs, and because of time pressure, Nersa is saying, well, this is what we are going to be using for now, because we're not going to be conducting public hearing. What is flawed in this method?
Yeah, look, there have been many complaints, and even now a legal challenge, that the price or tariff setting methodology is not truly cost reflective. In other words, normally, if it was cost reflective, you would look at recovering the prudently and efficiently incurred costs by the municipal distributor and include a adequate return on investment in determining the cost structure. So the tariff structure is really determined by what it costs to buy the energy from Eskom, what it costs to run your own distribution network, the operations and maintenance activities, and then an adequate return on investment, to allow for future growth and future investment in that business. And I think in the past, to some extent, the pricing has been set rather arbitrarily, and perhaps as a result more of benchmarking rather than cost reflectivity. And so there are these challenges by customer organizations that are insisting that we should go back to cost reflectivity. And I think Nersa accepts that. And in fact, one of the Nersa board members, Ms. Nomfundo Maseti, complained that, in fact, that Nersa was not following the legal requirements in terms of tariff setting in accordance with cost reflectivity. So there's an acknowledgement within Nersa that they are actually not following the legal prescripts. And I think there is an effort to review the way they set prices and tariffs to try and ensure that going forward a more cost-reflective approach will be applied in future. But there is still a lot of water to flow under the bridge in sorting this methodology out. There's recently been papers published by Nersa, by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, calling for public comments on the new electricity price methodology, the price-setting methodology that is going to be applied in South Africa. So it's still very much a work in progress.
Yeah. It sounds to me from what you're saying, this cost-reflective tariff setting would be more in favor of municipalities more than it would be in favor of consumers.
Well, it depends. It depends on what you know, it's not just all costs or any costs. It is costs that are prudently and efficiently incurred. So I'll just give you an example, and it's been mentioned, you know, in this discussion. So-called non-technical losses. Look, that's a euphemism for theft and non-payment of electricity. Nersa is saying that, you know, the customer should not bear the costs of theft and non-payment of electricity. The distributor, if it's operating efficiently, should have a certain level of collecting its revenue. And certainly many, in fact, I would say all distributors at the moment, including Eskom, by the way, fall well below the acceptable level or the acceptable threshold of non-technical losses, and they try and pass these costs through to the customer in the tariff. And I think Nersa is putting its foot down now and saying, no, those are not efficiently and prudently incurred costs, this non-payment and theft of electricity. It's up to the distributor itself to drive those costs down, and they should not be passed through to the customer. So I don't think it's entirely true to say that cost reflectivity favors the municipalities, because only efficiently and prudently incurred costs should be passed through.
So, Peter, you believe if this cost reflectivity method was used, you would be able to buy electricity maybe at a lower tariff than what you're currently buying it for, and you'd be able to pass that on to the consumers then in that way?
Yeah, look, I suppose that can be true, but I think there's a bit more to that. You know, for us in the municipality like the city of Tshwane, we ourselves have to conduct cost of supply studies, which we are currently in progress of. And that cost of supply, as Chris has pointed out, should reflect what it costs you to deliver the service and what the tariff should be, which should then form part of your public consultation process with Nersa. And then, of course, with municipalities traditionally, we also battle the culture of non-payment that has been facing local governments for a decade or the past 2 decades, where there's just this culture of non-payment, which also affects the cost of the supply study. So you know, it goes a little bit further to obviously from the distributor, but I think local government also has a responsibility to make sure that we do those proper cost of supply studies, that we can provide the service as needed. And I think as Chris has pointed out, you know, we sit with a lot of losses, distribution losses, non-technical losses, obviously technical losses as well. We know that infrastructure maintenance in local government is a major problem in terms of historical backlogs in terms of that, which also affects that. And that again affects the service provision of that, and then of course that just has a very negative ripple effect on everything else. So I think it does go, you know, I do share the sentiment of basing it on the cost of the supply, but I also think for us, for instance, in the city of Tshwane, from a cost of supply study for ourselves as well, and then to base engagements and public engagements and consultations based on those actual facts of the cost of supply.
Can I come in here quickly?
Yes, Chris, go for it.
Yeah. I think one thing about this cost of supply methodology is that it is trying to cut out excessive profits that are made by municipalities by excessively high tariffs that are then used to cross-subsidize other municipal services. And that, as a fundamental principle, is not in line with this question of cost-reflective prices. Because if you are making excess profits through excessively high tariffs and you're using that money to cross-subsidize other loss-making municipal services, be it water, be it refuse collection, sanitation, and other municipal services, then you're burdening the electricity customer unnecessarily and not collecting your revenue from the other users of municipal services. And so I think this cost-reflective pricing is definitely an effort to avoid these excessive tariffs that result in cross-subsidization of other services.
Yeah. Peter, what are you going to do? Because, I mean, for example, unions are pointing to this fact that consumers, in fact, households in general, are facing a lot of pressure. And we have an electricity crisis. Another tariff hike actually is something that is unpalatable. It's a pain that households are not able to actually absorb. And in return, we are going to be seeing more stealing of electricity. If not, we're going to be seeing families wanting to use other forms of energy, which in other instances lead to fires and so on and so forth, especially in squatter camps and places like that. How do you plan to respond to such challenges?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question, and I think one of the approaches we're taking in the city of Tshwane, if I can come back to the point again I made earlier, is of creating a culture of payment. And it's a lot more than simply just creating a culture of payment. You obviously through consultation, we do need people to pay for the services they consume. And it has been pointed out in this discussion, if the burden comes down to only a few people, it's not really adjusted to the cost of supply. It factors in a lot of other costs to that tariff, which is not fair and which is trying to be addressed here. But we have to follow, and then there's the other side of that, creating this culture of payment, that's to provide services of high quality. So it's not an easy task. But we certainly, I think, trying to take that approach with organized labor and with consumers holistically throughout the city of Tshwane. And that is that we can't simply just rely on the write-off of debt as what traditionally has been done in local governments. And that we need to start creating this culture of payment, and then on the other side of that, people need to pay, and we need to provide services. So, that again comes into line with making sure that your structures are in place to provide the services, that you are fit for purpose in terms of local government and what you need to do on your core mandates, to come back to your core mandates and to try and move away from unfunded mandates as far as possible. It's not an easy task, but I think the one approach we are taking for us here in the city of Tshwane is to really trying to get back to those basics and to not just rely on the like historically, as I've said, writing off of debt and just plotting along as we did in the past. Yeah. There needs to be a buy-in from consumers and from ratepayers. Yeah. That, as I mentioned, they need to pay for services, and then of course the other side of that equation is the delivery of services. So it's not an easy task. Yeah. And the decay has been quite severe in the city of Tshwane, but also in local government in general, as we have seen from the Auditor General's reports as well throughout South Africa. But it's just one thing we need to keep pushing and getting, start amending and start getting everything in line with that. The bottom line is people need to pay for services, and the services need to be in line with what they use, and it needs to be affordable. And we need to work towards that consistently to improve it over the next couple of years.
And Chris, I suppose it's that buy-in from the ratepayers that I'm a little bit more concerned about, especially following the processes and how they are being done, for example, using the wrong methodology and so on, or flawed methodology, shall I say, and so on and so forth. Is this tariff increase open to a court challenge? I mean, would at some point the community say, look, you didn't consult with us in the implementation of these above inflation tariffs, and the process of consultation was not adequate, and therefore we're challenging this particular tariff?
Well, I think there could be some challenges, and I want to explain why. Nersa, as you know, has announced this 7.5% proposed increase for municipal distributors. And they have at the same time announced there is going to be a consultation process. But it's not going to be through public hearings this time round. They say they don't have enough time to do public hearings. It's going to simply be written comments. Now, that unfortunately restricts the consultation process to those players that have the resources to do written submissions, generally business. And it cuts out the comment and consultation process with really people on the ground. I'm talking through NGOs, through community organizations, which literally do not have the capacity to do formal written comments, and they rely upon oral submissions at public hearings, and there's not going to be such. And I'm hearing, and I heard today, comments by a very senior person, Professor Rod Crompton, used to be on the board of Nersa, saying that this dispensing with the oral or public hearing part of consultation, he reckons that they are in breach of this Act of Parliament in not embarking on public hearings, because it excludes certain categories of consumers who will not be adequately in a position if they only are allowed to make written representations.
Yeah. MMC, how far is the DA government from cushioning consumers from this punishing electricity tariff? I mean, what measures or what strategies are you currently implementing, and how far are you from seeing those strategies actually begin to come online?
Thank you. Well, look, as this coalition government, we quite serious about addressing the problems going with the service delivery. So that will be your losses, your non-technical, your technical, as well as your distribution losses that we have. We do realize, I think, as a coalition government, that you can't simply it can't just be business as usual. I mean, in the city of Tshwane, it's common knowledge. It's in our financial statements. Our losses are easily, both for electricity and water, can easily equate to about 3 billion a year. And that's where you need to start. You need to start with those non-technical losses. And we've made taken an active approach in the city of Tshwane to address those losses going forward in this new financial year and to reduce them. Because, as Chris has pointed out, what happens traditionally is this gets passed on to consumers, which is not fair. And so that's where we need to start. And then, of course, also with infrastructure maintenance, to limit the distribution losses that we have. And then, of course, the other aspect is we need to start looking at alternative forms, and we also need to look at alternative revenue sources. I think business as usual for local government is something of the past now. We can't simply just rely. We see that on how many municipalities are not being able to fund themselves anymore. how many municipalities are battling to get to funded and balanced budgets. So there's a need for taking a different approach and to come back. I know it sounds a bit like a cliche always, but when I say coming back to the basics, that's exactly what I mean. And I think as a coalition government, and we're very blessed here in the city of Tshwane, although the DA is one of the role players here, we have a very stable coalition government with a number of parties, and I think everybody share that sentiment.
Yeah.
That it's a building phase, that we need to start addressing those problem areas, and then to obviously stimulate the local economy from there to start growing it as well, and taking measures forward from there.
All right, MMC,
Can I come in here again, please?
Yes.
If I may quickly come in and say...
A quick one, Chris. We are out of time. Quick 30 seconds.
Sure.
Go for it.
Just a quick one to say that we mustn't think that theft and non-payment only applies to poor customers that can't afford to pay. And we've seen from Tshwane, they've taken action against big business, even taken action against SARS and government and Gautrain and some very significant landlords and companies within the city to ensure that they pay up.
Yeah.
It's outrageous that these big companies, including government departments, are in areas with their electricity bill.